You are not hungry for attention. You are hungry for proof that you exist, and that is a different kind of hunger entirely. That is the kind that cannot be fed by likes, by comments, by views, by someone's eyes moving across your face and lingering just long enough to make you feel real. That kind of hunger sits in the stomach of the soul, and it does not care how many people are watching. It only knows the ache of not yet being found, even by yourself. You have been mistaking the symptom for the need, and that mistake is costing you more than you are willing to admit right now. So let's begin there. Not with judgment, with clarity. There is a version of you that is always performing. You may not call it that. You call it sharing. You call it connecting. You call it confidence, humor, presence, honesty. You tell yourself you are simply someone who expresses openly, who communicates freely, who shows up boldly in rooms and feeds and timelines. But underneath that performance, if you are still enough to feel it, is a question that never stops running. A question so constant, you have stopped hearing it consciously. It hums beneath every post, every story, every overshared confession, every perfectly angled photograph, every reply you craft 3 times before sending. The question is, do I matter? Not to them, to you. And you are terrified of what the silence says back. Here is what no one explains about attention seeking. It is not arrogance. The truly arrogant do not need your validation. They are insulated by their own certainty, bloated with it, untouchable in the worst kind of way. Attention-seeking is almost the opposite. It is a wound pretending to be confidence. It is a person who learned, somewhere early, somewhere painful, that love was not consistent. That visibility was conditional. That to be quiet was to be forgotten. That to be forgotten was to be worthless. And so they adapted. They became louder, more interesting, more visible, more useful, more entertaining, more attractive, more dramatic, more vulnerable, whatever currency the room accepted. You did not choose this, but you are maintaining it, and that is your responsibility now. Think about where the pattern began, not on social media. Social media did not create this in you. It simply built an industrial-scale machine around a wound that was already there. Go further back. Think about the rooms where you first learned that love came and went without explanation, where approval had to be earned and could be revoked without warning, where you were praised when you performed well and invisible when you did not, where the adults around you were emotionally inconsistent, present one moment, absent the next, warm then cold, interested then distracted, where you learned that the way to keep someone close was to keep them entertained, keep them impressed, keep them needing you, give them a reason to stay. You were a child trying to stabilize something that should never have been your job, but you learned. Children always learn. And what you learned was this: your value is relational. It exists in the reaction of others. It requires an audience. Without the audience, the value disappears, or at least it feels that way, deep in the nervous system where the real education happened. That lesson is still running. It is running when you post something and then check immediately, almost involuntarily, within seconds, to see if anyone has responded. It is running when a conversation goes quiet and your body interprets the silence as rejection before your mind can correct it. It is running when you exaggerate a story just enough to make it more compelling, when you perform your pain publicly and then feel a strange hollow guilt afterward, because you got the reaction, but you still feel empty. It is running when you pick up your phone not because you expect anything specific, but because the stillness of not being acknowledged feels unbearable. That is not boredom, that is withdrawal. Your nervous system has been conditioned to require external stimulation to feel emotionally regulated, and like any dependency, it escalates. The dose that worked last year does not work now. The likes that used to feel satisfying now feel baseline. You need more reach, more response, more reaction. You need the comment, not just the like. You need the DM, not just the comment. You need someone to call unprompted, not just to text. You need the specific person's attention, not just anyone's, because at the center of this pattern is not a need for quantity. It is a need for the right validation, the validation that finally lands deep enough to fill the place that has been hollow for a very long time. But here is the problem. The place is hollow because the structure is wrong, not because you have not yet found enough people to fill it. Attention cannot stabilize identity. Say that slowly to yourself. Let it settle. Attention can stimulate identity. It can light it up, give it a brief warmth, make it feel vivid and real and confirmed. But stimulation is not stability. Fire is not architecture. The flame proves the room exists, but it does not build the walls. You have been trying to build a self out of other people's reactions to you. And every time the reactions slow, every time the phone goes quiet, every time the room empties, every time the conversation ends, every time someone stops reaching back, the structure trembles because it was never yours. You borrowed it from every pair of eyes that looked at you long enough to make you feel real, and you built the entire house out of borrowed material. And borrowed things can be taken back at any time, without warning, without reason, without apology. This is why the anxiety arrives so quickly when you are ignored. This is why being overlooked feels like being erased. This is why a single person's withdrawal can feel like an existential crisis out of proportion to the actual situation. Because it is not really about that person. That person is just the latest load-bearing wall in a structure made of other people's attention. When they pull away, something in your sense of self begins to lean, and you scramble to rebuild it. More posts, more performance, more contact, more questions designed to provoke reassurance, more wit, more warmth, more availability, more sacrifice, anything to bring the eyes back, to bring the confirmation back, to stop the trembling. You are exhausted. You just haven't named it yet. There is a specific kind of fatigue that comes from performing constantly. It is not physical, it is something deeper. It is the fatigue of never being able to rest fully in who you are, because who you are has been constructed for an audience, and the audience never fully leaves, even in private. Even alone in the dark, phone face up, waiting, the audience is still there in your imagination. You are still composing, still framing, still editing, still calculating how the version of yourself you are inhabiting right now would translate if someone were watching. When did you last experience yourself with no one watching? When did you last feel emotionally real, without requiring someone else to confirm it? Stop for a moment, not rhetorically. Actually stop, because this is the question at the center of everything. Not how to get more attention, not how to build a larger audience, attract better relationships, or project a more magnetic self. The question is whether you can exist fully, quietly, without anxiety, in a room where no one is watching, where the phone is face down, where no one knows what you're thinking or feeling, where you are alone with yourself in the most unperformed way possible. If that image unsettles you, you already know what the work is. Because the truth is this: the person you have never fully met is yourself, the unperformed you, the you that exists before the audience assembles. And you have been avoiding that person for a long time, not out of laziness, out of fear. Because somewhere in the learning, you came to believe that the unperformed you, the one without charm, without interesting stories, without visible pain or visible achievement, without beauty or humor or strategic vulnerability, that version of you is not enough. That version would be seen and found empty, found ordinary, found forgettable. And forgettable feels like annihilation. So you perform, and you perform, and you perform, and you perform, and the performance becomes the identity. And one day you look in the mirror, and you genuinely cannot tell where the performance ends and you begin. You do not know what your real opinions are versus the opinions that made people like you. You do not know what you actually enjoy versus what you have said you enjoy enough times that it became true. You do not know who you are in silence because you have never allowed the silence to last long enough to find out. This is identity collapse, and it is not dramatic, it is quiet. It looks like scrolling at 2 in the morning, not because you expect to find anything, but because the stillness of your own mind feels unsafe. It looks like needing the television on to fall asleep, not for entertainment, but for company, for the sound of human voices arranged in patterns that keep your nervous system just stimulated enough to avoid confronting what is underneath. It looks like reading 15 self-improvement articles and watching 20 videos about rebuilding yourself and absorbing none of it, because you are not actually looking for information. You are looking for the feeling of motion, the feeling of doing something, the temporary comfort of being inside content that is about growth, without the terrifying stillness of actual change. You have mistaken consumption for progress. You have mistaken visibility for connection. You have mistaken reaction for love, and none of those substitutions are working. You already know this. The proof is the persistence of the hunger. If attention had been filling the hole would be smaller by now. Instead, it has grown. Because every time you fed it with external validation, you confirmed the belief that external validation is what you need, and reinforced the very mechanism that keeps you trapped. This is the loop. And now you can see it from the outside. Here is something difficult. Some of the relationships in your life are not relationships. They are performance arrangements. You provide something, your presence, your charm, your emotional labor, your body, your humor, your stories, your crisis, and in return you receive attention. And you have told yourself this is intimacy. But intimacy requires the unperformed self. And you have never brought that self to the table. Because you are not sure it would be welcome, because you are not sure it is interesting enough, because you have learned that the raw, uncertain, quiet version of you does not generate the same response as the constructed one. So you keep performing, and they keep watching, and no one is actually meeting anyone. And then one day you feel profoundly alone inside a room full of people who claim to care about you, and you do not know why. You have the audience, you have the response. You have the notifications and the followers and the attention and the validation, and you are still hollow, and the hollowness now has a specific quality to it, because it is populated. It is a hollow surrounded by witnesses. A loneliness with an audience, that is one of the most specific and devastating forms of suffering a human being can experience. Walk away from the performance for a moment, not forever, not dramatically, not as a grand gesture for people to notice and interpret. Quietly, privately, without announcement. Put the phone down. Not to prove something, to feel something. Because what waits for you in that silence is not emptiness. It is the beginning of an honest relationship with yourself. And yes, it is uncomfortable at first, profoundly uncomfortable. The first minutes of real silence after a lifetime of noise feel like deprivation. They feel like something has gone wrong. The nervous system reaches for stimulation automatically, the way a hand reaches for a railing on an unfamiliar staircase in the dark. This is normal. This is not a sign you are broken. It is a sign you have been overtrained by the environment you chose and the wounds that chose you. Sit in the discomfort. Do not immediately interpret the discomfort as evidence that the silence is wrong. The discomfort is withdrawal. And withdrawal is proof that something had power over you. The goal is not to eliminate the discomfort. The goal is to remain in the silence long enough to remember that you survive it, that you exist within it. But your value does not evaporate when the room empties and the screen goes dark, and no one is watching what you do with your face. You are still here, and here is the beginning of something different. Protect your attention the same way you have been craving it from others, because you have been spending your attention recklessly, spreading it thin across timelines and notifications and the emotional crises of people who have never invested in yours, while simultaneously feeling emotionally bankrupt. And that is not coincidence. That is the cost of living on the outside of yourself. You have been investing everything outward, performance, outward seeking, outward need, while the interior goes unattended. The interior atrophies without attention, not the attention of others, yours. The discipline of self-examination, the practice of sitting with your own thoughts long enough to actually hear them rather than immediately broadcasting them. The capacity to experience an emotion privately, to let it move through you without immediately reaching for an audience to witness it, to grieve without posting the grief, to celebrate without needing the celebration confirmed, to have an opinion and hold it quietly inside without needing anyone to validate it into existence. This is not coldness, this is containment. And containment is a form of power most people who grew up emotionally unsteady have never experienced. Think about what you have shared publicly that deserved to be kept. Think about the pain you broadcast in hopes of receiving tenderness. Think about the vulnerability you performed in hopes of finally being truly seen, and then noticed afterward that you had given something precious away and received warmth in return, but still felt unseen because you were seen by the audience, but not by yourself. You still had not looked at your own pain with honesty and tenderness. You were outsourcing that work. No one can do that work for you, not the person who always responds. not the partner who says all the right things, not the followers who resonate with your words, not the one whose approval you have been chasing through every version of yourself you have tried. They can witness you, but witnessing is not the same as integration. Witnessing is not the same as healing. You have to look at yourself, not the curated version, not the version that is interesting enough to be loved, not the version in the photograph or the caption or the story you tell, the actual one, the one that checks the phone compulsively because it cannot tolerate its own company for more than 4 minutes, the one that is exaggerated, performed, and concealed, the one that confuses desire for love and attention for meaning, the one that is reading this or listening to this right now, possibly still scanning for a version of validation in the recognition itself. I see you, but that is not what saves you. You seeing yourself is what saves you. And the beginning of that, the very beginning, the quietest possible starting point, is to stop feeding the mechanism for long enough to feel what is underneath it, to let the likes run dry, to let the thread go quiet, to let the phone sit face down on the table, and to not reach for it, to remain in the room with yourself as if you were someone worth staying in the room with, as if your company, your unperformed, unpolished, uncertain, still figuring it out company, was not something to escape, but something to slowly, carefully learn to inhabit. Because here is what is waiting for you on the other side of all this noise. It is not grandeur. It is not revelation. It is not a sudden transformation or a morning when you wake up and feel finally, permanently whole. What is waiting is smaller and more real than that. What is waiting is a quieter nervous system, a self that does not require constant confirmation to function, a person who can receive genuine connection when it arrives, because they are not performing for it, not testing it, not managing it, not quietly terrified it will disappear if they stop being interesting enough to deserve it. What is waiting is the ability to be still and to feel your own weight in the stillness. The specific gravity of an identity that belongs to you, not to your history of performing for others, not to the metrics on a screen, not to whoever happened to make you feel most visible at any given time. Yours, built from the inside, from the long, quiet work of getting honest with yourself. This is not about becoming someone who never shares, never expresses, never reaches for connection. Connection is one of the most important things a human being can do. The difference is the origin. Connection from fullness is something entirely different from connection from desperation. Expression from genuine presence is something entirely different from performance from fear of invisibility. Learn the difference in your own body. You will begin to feel it when you share something, and do not immediately need to know how it was received. You will feel it when the phone is quiet and your body does not sound the alarm. You will feel it when someone does not respond, and you can hold that experience without collapsing into it. Not because you do not care, but because your sense of self is no longer entirely housed in their reply. That shift is not something someone can give you. It grows slowly in the silence you've been avoiding. Start there, not with grand discipline, not with public declarations of change that are themselves a form of performance. Start with 5 minutes of silence that belongs only to you. Start with one thing you feel and do not post. Start with one moment of being genuinely present in your own experience, without immediately converting it into content, into a story, into something to offer the room. Start with the question you have been afraid to sit with. Not, do I matter to them? But, do I know who I am when no one is watching? And if the answer is uncertain, if the question opens into something uncomfortable and wide, then you have found where the real work begins, not in the audience, not in the algorithm, not in the reply, the reaction, the recognition, in the silence, where you are always waiting for yourself.